Today is day 6 of our unit on solving quadratics, unit 9. Today we're going to talk about how do we model and solve consecutive integer or odd to even. So like a consecutive odd, so 1 and 3, or consecutive even, 2 and 4, word problems. That might be very confusing. So before we get started, I want to talk about how we're going to get through these questions. So the first thing you're going to do, you need to underline and highlight all the key words. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is write a let statement. So we're going to introduce variables. We're creating our own equations, so we need to represent them with a let statement. And then we're going to write the equation, set the equation equal to 0. We will be solving these by factoring. Then we have to reject any questions that don't make sense. For example, if we're talking about area and you get an answer, or an age maybe, and you get an answer that is negative, obviously we are going to reject that answer because the answer can't be negative. Remember, when we are solving quadratic equations, we usually have two solutions. So if both of them get rejected, then there's no solution. If one of them gets rejected, then only the other one is the solution. So this is where the real world application problems, they differ from the other types of equations that we've been doing and solving. So then we'll write the solution, and then of course you can throw it in and check. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about is what consecutive means. So if something is consecutive, it means it happens right after it. So for example, the numbers 1 and 2. So basically what we're going to do is we don't know what the integers are. Two consecutive integers that the product, okay, is 56. Now, yes, you may be able to do that in your head, which I hope you all can. But again, just to learn the process, I'm doing a little bit of an easier one. Okay, so product we know means to multiply. Okay, and then consecutive just means one after another. One after another. So we're going to our first integer is going to be represented with an x. And then our second integer is going to be represented with an x plus 1. So now what we're going to do is we're going to solve this. So just like we did when we did linear equations, you use what you have and then you go back to the equation and you try to set it up. So this is saying that these two integers, x and x plus 1, and I gave x plus 1 because let's say our solution is 6. So 6 plus 1 would be 7. 6 and 7 are consecutive. Okay, so product means we're going to multiply. So I'm going to just multiply these two and set them equal to 56. Now hopefully you recognize that we have to distribute. Okay, so by distributing, now we have a quadratic. Okay, so set it equal to 0. Factor. Okay, so what multiplies to negative 56? We know one will be positive, one will be negative, and add to a positive 1. So my factors are 8 and 7, and the larger one takes the sign. And then you solve it just like we've been doing. Okay. So I'm going to do these one at a time. So one of my solutions is going to be, that's negative. Can't write. Okay, one of my solutions is going to be negative 8, and then negative 8 plus 1 would be negative 7. Okay, so there's one solution. if we solve this one, we get x equals 7. Okay, so that would be 7 and 8. Now if you check this real quick, so 7 times 8 is 56, and negative 8 times negative 7 is 56. So they both check, so there's your entire solution. And that's all there is to it. Okay, so let's do number 2. So the product of two consecutive negative integers. Now we're getting a little more specific, okay? So we're going to say first integer is going to be x, second integer is x plus 1. And honestly, these are all going to be the same when you're setting these up if they say two consecutive negative integers or any integers in particular. Okay, so let's do the same exact thing. So x squared plus x equals 110. Okay. So I skipped a step. I'm just subtracting the 110 over. Okay. Two factors right next to each other. Again, one positive, one negative, because our product needs to be negative 110. So my positive is going to be 11, and my negative will be 10. So x plus 11 equals 0. So when I solve that, I get negative 11. And when I solve this, I get a positive 10. Alright, so if you look back, now before you give your solution, if you look back, this says that the integers have to be negative. So if you get a solution that doesn't satisfy what you're asking for, we say that you reject this. Okay? So my final solution will be negative 11. Negative 11 plus 1 would be negative 10. And again, if you multiply those together, it does in fact get 110. Okay. Alright, so let's bump it up a notch. So find two consecutive integers such that the sum of their squares, okay, so the sum of their squares is 421. Okay, so they can be negative or positive, so that doesn't matter. So again, first integer is x, second integer is x plus 1. Notice also that I'm making them both the same variable. You're not going to want to make those an x and a y because we don't have, that would be a systems of equations that we did with linear equations. That's just not going to work for these. Okay, so now we're finding the sum of their squares. So we have to do x squared plus x plus 1 squared. Okay, so literally we're just squaring those two things. So x squared plus, so let's expand this, and then we're going to have to FOIL. So this one is a little more challenging than the other ones. So I get x squared plus x plus 1. Again, that's just FOIL. Combine like terms, so I'm going to get 2x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 421. So let me subtract that. Okay, so I get 2x squared plus 2x minus 420 equals 0. I am going to pull out that 2 to make my life a little easier. Okay, so I'm going to divide out that 2. Remember, when you get rid of that 2, kind of don't have to do anything with it. Minus 210. Okay, so now I can actually kind of like drop this off, like that's nothing, I don't need to do anything with that now. So I get one positive, one negative. This is going to be 15, and 14. Okay, that might take you a little bit of calculating. But I'm sure you guys will get there, eventually. Okay, so this is going to be, so x equals negative 15 or a positive 14. So we just write our final solutions. So one will be negative 15 and negative 14. And positive 14 and a positive 15. And again, we can choose both of those solutions because we are squaring them, okay? So remember, when you square something, they both become positive, so then when we add them to get 421, we'll get the same thing both times. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to do two positive even consecutive integers, okay? So for these, it's going to be a little bit different because we want evens. So hopefully you recognize, okay, so the first one will be x, but now I can't just add 1 because that will be an odd and an even number. So now instead of a 1, we're going to do a 2. Okay, so for example, if x is equal to 2, then 2 plus 2 is 4. So that would be the next consecutive even number. Okay, we're doing a product, okay, and our final solution has to be positive, so keep that in mind as well. So we're going to multiply these like before and set them equal to 80. Distribute and subtract 80 over. One positive, one negative, and let's see, we're going to do 10 and 8. So set them both equal to 0. Okay, so that one worked. Now notice with this one, so we are going to have to reject this because it is negative. Okay? And yes, it is important that you do write reject every time. Okay? So now just be careful when you do this. So now my solution is going to be 8 and 10. Okay? 8 and 10. Alright, so the product of two consecutive negative odd integers. So again, as soon as you see the words even or odd, you have to remember first integer will be x, and second integer will be x plus 2. Also, you might be asking, well, Miss G, if every time we write the same exact thing, x and x plus 2, why do we have to write that every time? I need to know that for your let statement. You need to write that down because by writing that down, again, if you make a mistake, so let's say you do x and x plus 1, I will know where you made your mistake, so I can correct your error. Okay. Also, if you skip any steps along the way, it's a lot easier for me to find your error, and again, remember, we always want all the points that we could possibly get. So just take that extra 2 seconds it takes and always write that let statement. And again, at the end, you'll remember to put it in there. Alright, I'm going to have to think about this one. One positive, one negative. We'll do 36, nope, 13 and 11. and 11. Okay, so x plus 13 equals 0, x minus 11 equals 0. Okay, so that one is negative, so that works. So we get negative 13 and negative 11. Okay. And then with this one, we're going to have to reject that because that's going to be positive. Okay, last one. Okay, so this is what I was talking about when you have in the beginning, when I was talking about when to reject something. Make sure that you pay attention. Now, we're talking about ages, so can we have a negative age? No. Now, this one, we don't have to go that far, but I just wanted to point that out if they didn't give you these multiple choice. Okay, so notice that they want you to use the variable j, so instead of an x, we're going to use a j. So Nick and Joe have ages that are consecutive odd integers. The products of their ages is 783. Which equation could be used to find Joe's age if he is the younger man? Okay, very important. Okay, so Joe is going to be J, and who's the other one? Nick. And they're odds, so this is plus 2. Okay, so they say the product of their ages, so we're going to multiply. Notice they usually, that's the other keywords you got to look for to see what you should do with those. So if they're a product, you're going to multiply them. If it's a sum, you're going to add them. So pay attention to that. And I'm losing it because obviously we just said that's J. Okay, so J and then J plus 2. So their product equals 783. Okay, so we're going to distribute. Okay, and so you'll see that the answer is number 3. Okay, so we are going to do an activity next. Okay, it's going to be a sticky note activity. And we'll be in our groups.